Hey everyone, I'm just here to quickly go through the domain and range for the 5 base functions. So the first two should have been pretty easy for you. We have talked about linear and quadratic functions in depth since grade 9. So when we're talking about the domain for a linear function, so any possible x values, we can clearly see that this graph goes as far right and as far left as possible. So our domain is just xer, or any real number. The exact same thing goes for our range. So this graph will eventually reach as high and as low as possible. So YER is our range. In terms of our quadratic function, we should know by now that quadratics always have a domain of xer. Eventually this graph will extend as far right and as far left as possible. Our range is a little bit different, so we can see that our graph is only in the top 2 quadrants. The lowest point that it gets is right here. So our range is going to be YER such that y is greater than or equal to 0. Now, of course, this range is going to change with transformations that we apply, but our base function does have a range of y is greater than or equal to 0. For our rational function, it does look like this graph extends as far right and as far left as possible. I can see that here and here, but what I can also see is that there's no x values here. So because of these asymptotes, because this graph gets very, very close to the axes but will not actually cross it, our domain is xer such that x cannot be 0. The exact same thing happens with our range, YER such that y cannot be 0. So our graph goes forever up and forever down, but it will never cross this point right here. Our radical, so we see our radical being in this one quadrant only. So this would mean that we only ever get positive x's and positive y's. So domain xer such that x is greater than or equal to 0, and range YER such that y is greater than or equal to 0. The last graph that we're going to be talking about is our absolute graph. So what you can see is that this graph is only in the top 2 quadrants. So when I'm talking about my domain, it will eventually go as far right and as far left as possible. So my domain is pretty easy. My range is a little bit different, so all of my y values are bigger than 0. They are all positive. So YER such that y is greater than or equal to 0.